But tonight, what we're going to be talking about is the difference between flexibility and mobility. We're also going to be talking about fascia and fascia health and what it takes and what fascia is. Very, very important component of our health that we need to take care of on a regular basis. And, there's starting to be more and more people investigating what fascia is and incorporating fascial movements and fascial health into their program. But I'm going to go ahead and get started, and then we'll share the screen here. Okay, so the first question is, how does flexibility and mobility differ? Many times people will kind of use them interchangeably, but they are two very different things. And what we're going to be talking about is why mobility is important tonight, why flexibility is important tonight. And of course, like I was talking about before, why fascia is an important component of optimizing your health and why you need to definitely pay attention to it if you're not. So, in terms of the definition that we see here, so mobility is the ability of a joint to move actively through a range of motion. It encompasses strength, coordination, and control in addition to range. So when we think of mobility, just think of joint and joint health, like how you move through a joint. So a lot of times what I will see is people not only lack flexibility, but they lack mobility. So they have poor range of motion through their joint. So just think of kind of doing a circle with your wrist or your ankle or your hip or your knee, your shoulder. Many times there's restrictions there. And the restrictions in the joints actually come from calcium deposits. There can be adhesions or scar tissue through wear and tear over the years. And I always tell people, if we could have one thing maybe being slightly restricted, I would rather see someone who had less flexibility in their musculature, but greater mobility through the joints. Because when you're restricted through the joints, then you are going to struggle with how you move. And you're also going to be challenged with freedom of movement. So, for instance, if someone's really tight in the ankles, they're going to lack the ability to squat, even if they have good flexibility in their hips. So a lot of times we have to take a look at the mobility of the ankles, and we have to take a look at the health of the feet. Because if we're not healthy in our feet and our ankles, everything starts there. And so our movement can be significantly altered. And then with flexibility, of course, most people are familiar with flexibility, but it's just the ability of muscles to lengthen passively through a range of motion. And because today, more and more people are sitting, probably more than we have in the history of time, people tend to be very tight in their hips, and they tend to be very tight in their neck and their shoulders. And so what happens is people tend to be a lot tighter on the muscles on the front of their body, and then consequently they're weaker on the backside. So when we take a look at the body and optimizing health, as many of you know, from working with us, we always talk about how the body's always going to work best in homeostasis or balance. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about our joints, our muscles, our biochemistry, our body's always going to work best when it's in homeostasis or that balance. So just remember this: anytime you have a joint pain, there's always cause and effect. And so what we want to get across to you is we need to be able to ascertain, is that pain coming from a restriction in the joint, or is there systemic inflammation? Now, Paula sees people all the time that have a significant amount of systemic inflammation, whether it's food intolerances, which is a biggie. People, it's not just, is this food healthy? The question we have to ask, is it healthy for me? So, some people do really well with spinach and kale, and others, because of the high oxalic acid, they will actually develop joint pain from that. So everyone's different. So in terms of just when people have, say, joint inflammation, what are some things, Paula, that you typically will recommend? And clearly, if you've worked with us for any amount of time, Paula tests for everything. We want to make sure if you're taking a product, it's right for you. But what are some of the key things that you find just for joint health, Paula?
Well, joint could actually be, a lot of times it can be arthritis. And so then I'd really want to look to the liver. And then also if you look at, I think of joints as being like, you need like lubrication for your joints. So it's like, what can you use for that? So what do people usually need? So I would say definitely omega-3 oils. And if you're going to do like a fish oil, I love tuna omega-3 oil. I love BioOmega, another one that we have that's BioOmega. And then I would also say probably a big thing would be actually more avoiding the PUFAs. They call it the polyunsaturated fatty acids. That's your omega-6s in your diet. A lot of processed foods have the corn oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil. Those are highly inflammatory to the joints. So I would definitely say avoiding the PUFAs, getting some good omega-3s in is a start. And then from there, we're really looking at what's inflaming your specific joints. Is it arthritis, or is it just you have inflammation due to, like Rob said about different foods, how they can cause inflammation, depending on, even some vegetables can cause inflammation. So, or is it sugar, heavy metals, chemicals, immune challenges? Any of those things can actually disrupt your joint mobility and cause inflammation. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and another thing too is, people talk about like gluten intolerance. Many times things like excessive gluten for certain people can really create a lot of joint inflammation as well. So,
Yeah.
common food intolerances are pro-inflammatory foods, obviously wheat and dairy, and like Paula said, sugar. Sugar is probably the main one that if we get people, and sugar is so addictive. And that's a big one. So we want to think, if we have joint health, are we moving, articulating our joints on a daily basis, the way they're designed to move? And then do we not have any inflammation in that particular joint? And then in terms of, I'm just going to take this on for a second here, but in terms of muscle health, obviously magnesium is a big one that I know you get a lot of people on, Paula. Is there anything else in terms of muscle health that you find that, there's patterns that people end up having that you end up seeing a lot of benefit getting people on other supplements?
I would have to definitely say minerals. Minerals are key to your muscle health, but it's really important because if you think about what's a muscle, your stomach's a muscle, your heart is a muscle. You have so many muscles to your body that control your digestive system, control your circulation. I mean, it's huge. So I would definitely say deficiencies of certain minerals are huge. So that's calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium. I also see iodine and zinc quite a bit as being deficient in a lot of people, for specifically for muscles. And then also vitamin E is the other one. So definitely making sure, and vitamin E draws oxygen into the muscles. So I really love vitamin E. So I'd say minerals and vitamin E are the two main ones, or basically those are the main categories I'm looking at for good muscle health. But of course, I'm always going to test to see what is someone deficient dim, not just go broad spectrum overall.
Yeah, and we see today more than ever before hydration issues. Either people are drinking poor quality water, they're not drinking enough water, they have electrolyte insufficiency, gut microbiome is off. And so if you're dehydrated at a cellular level, you're probably going to have some inflammation in the joints, or the muscles just are not going to be as supple or as pliable. And you're definitely going to notice that with unhealthy fascia when you're dehydrated. But what are you seeing nowadays, Paula, with people with from a hydration perspective? Everything I mentioned, anything else?
Hydration is a kind of a funny one because it's more often than not, what I'm finding that people are coming up with hydration, it's more that they're not absorbing their water into their cells. So it's cellular dehydration, which can cause all sorts of stuff, but headaches, constipation, pain because your muscles all hurt. A lot of people would think of it like almost like a fibromyalgia, like their whole body hurts. And that's because cellular wise, they're dehydrated. So I would definitely say we do the Ultima like electrolyte drinks just to kind of help if you don't know what's going on. But generally it's like you said, gut microbiome, or it's actually the pancreas that are affecting somebody from absorbing those nutrients. And a lot of times also small intestine. So if they're having any gut issues, you probably aren't absorbing your water into your cells. So there are definitely things that we can do to help that. It's huge. You start with electrolytes and go from there.
Yeah, and that's where it gets tricky sometimes. I mean, because the
Yeah.
variables are so different with everybody. And of course, we're in such a toxic world that it's in the air we breathe, the water that we drink, and many of you have heard we live out right next to a sod farm, and so we come up with agricultural toxins all the time that's stressing out our nervous system. So a lot of landmines we have to sidestep today. There's more and more things that are creating toxicity, stressing out our nervous system, and not allowing us to, either absorb our water or are creating systemic inflammation in our body as well. So just about every presentation I think I've done in the last few years, it always seems to circle back to the most fundamental foundational thing that is involved with the human body, and that's breathing. We're breathing 20 to 25,000 times a day, and that gives you a great opportunity to either optimize your health or detract from it, both from an orthopedic standpoint and then also a biochemical standpoint. And so what I want you guys to really understand is Paul and I really like to work from first principles. So Paul is really big in, making sure people are adequately hydrated. Are they absorbing their minerals? Are they actually absorbing their water at a cellular level? And for me, when I look at first principles, I always begin with how a person's breathing. And what I want to do is I want to show you guys an animation of mechanically how you should look when you're breathing. And today, more than ever, people are either holding their breath, their posture's more rounded, so their diaphragm is more compressed, they're not breathing full. And another thing, when you're breathing in a more of a vertical fashion like this, or your mouth breathing, you're over breathing, what happens is you overwork all these accessory respiratory muscles. So if you overwork the chest muscles, it rounds the shoulders. If you overwork the neck musculature, it can create headaches and shoulder problems and neck pain. So we want to make sure when we're breathing originating that breath from the diaphragm, and we are horizontal. So the diaphragm is a three-dimensional muscle, and we want to be able to fill that whole three-dimensional cylinder. And then we come up through the rib cage. So when I show this animation, I want you to breathe along with the animation and feel how your body feels when you're breathing. See if you can feel any restrictions and see if you feel like that animation looks. So I'm gonna bring the presentation here, and then I want you to just really pay attention to the animation here as we go through. So if you take a look at the horizontal expansion,
Rob, did you want to be
have
in slide view? The slideshow?
could you guys see the presentation there?
We are. It's in PowerPoint. It's not in the slideshow.
You can see the visualization though.
Okay. I'm going to bring this in. Is that better?
Yeah, now it's there.
So you can see that that's the attachment of the diaphragm. And when the diaphragm fills, what happens is we should have, again, that three-dimensional expansion. And so if you put your hands below your ribs, right below your ribs, your thumbs, right below your ribs, and you take an inhale, your thumb should expand out laterally. And what happens with most people, that area, that fascia, right on your sides gets very tight, gets locked down. And when that happens, things become very compressed, and the body's always going to take the path of least resistance. And when you start to expand, if that body feels that resistance, you're immediately going to go into that vertical pattern. What happens when you go into that vertical pattern is, again, not only do you overwork the very small accessory respiratory muscles, what happens is you actually start to upregulate your sympathetic nervous system. And then you get into this pattern of a dysregulated nervous system. And so you get locked into fight or flight. And you cannot heal in a fight or flight upregulated state. You have to be in a parasympathetic state. So diaphragmatic breathing is such a critical component. And one of the best things you can do if you're lying on your back is just have a shoe on your stomach and the focus on originating your breath from your belly. And then ideally what you want is if you have your thumbs below your rib cage, feeling that horizontal expansion. So the fascia and the diaphragm, this is one of the things that I really want you guys to pay attention to, because this right here can have such a profound impact. We are seeing more and more people today that are really struggling with anxiety and a number of orthopedic problems that go with that. And most of the time, it has its roots in faulty breathing mechanics. And so if you look at the improved respiratory efficiency, anytime we have more flexibility, more pliability, more motion through the diaphragm, we're actually going to have increased lung capacity. Because when things get really tight because you're breathing incorrectly and you go into that vertical pattern, then what happens is you're literally breathing at about 40 to 50% of your capacity. So when we talk about optimized fluid dynamics and improve, like for instance, lymphatic flow, that's basically your body's waste removal system. And when you're not breathing properly, you're not going to move your lymph as efficiently and effectively as you could. And one of the keys to having a robust immune system is making sure your lymphatic system is functioning optimally. So it's important that you originate your breathing through your diaphragm, and then we make sure that we start to break down any kind of fascia restrictions. So what is fascia? Fascia is just connective tissue. If you've ever open a piece of chicken, it's that white, um, it's that white material, and our body is enveloped entirely in connective tissue. So if you look at our body, it's like one big giant spider web of fascia. All of our organs, our glands, our ligaments, everything is connected with the fascia. And if you've got restricted fascia through your diaphragm, it can actually decrease organ motility. So what that means is it can create things like constipation. You can have a whole host of other digestive issues just because that fascia is compressing your internal organs and you're just not efficiently mobilizing waste product. So, and then core stability and posture, very essential for strengthening core muscles, aligning your spine. So, Paula, you're seeing a lot of people today on the table when you're testing. What are you noticing with their breathing?
I would have to say the majority of people definitely have the reverse breathing issue. That means that they're breathing from their lungs, their top of their lungs first, and then the middle, and then the bottom. The diaphragm last. So I see that a lot. So that causes a lot of anxiety for sure, and then also digestive issues that can cause. But it can cause so many fatigue. And then also think about sleep apnea. Like at night when you're breathing from your upper respiratory system, it seems like you're going to be breathing quite a bit more than the average person. Knowing from what Rob has told me, you should be under 10 breaths a minute. He's under 10 most of the time. And of course, he definitely at night, he's breathing from his lower diaphragm, I can tell, like when he goes to sleep. But for me, I still have work to do. I'm closer to 14 breaths a minute. So, but then you said people are up to like 20 to 22 breaths a minute. So they're totally hyperventilating all night long. That is so important to understand, because then you're not going to have energy during the day, not getting that good REM or deep sleep because you're over breathing. So I would definitely say it's top on the list for health stuff to get your breathing pattern corrected. I think it's kind of like riding your bike. It's like once you like learn how to do it, it's like once you know how to do it and once you get everything. So he opens up all of the intercostal muscles that it could be locking down your lungs and not allowing you to get that deep breath. So once you kind of can open all of that up and work on that, I think it's like just one of those things that it's like probably one of the most important things you could possibly do for your health. I mean, adding more oxygen into your body, sleeping better moods, less anxiety. Everyone needs that, especially at the older age, mature age.
Yeah, I just had a client that I was working with today that she came to me because she had a lot of neck, jaw, and shoulder issues. And she recently got an Oura ring, and we were looking at her HRV and her sleep numbers, but her respiration was showing 17 breaths a minute. And basically what that tells us is we're distressed. And many times if someone is really sick, they're, like Paula was saying, I see people at 20, 22 breaths a minute. And so when you take a look at, and even if you just count your breaths and you start working on slowing down your respiration, you can go from a really heightened state of this anxious feeling or this upregulated sympathetic nervous system state to a parasympathetic in probably 10 or 12 breaths. And if you find yourself in a really stressful situation, what you want to focus on is the more extensive exhale. So just to give you kind of a couple of different variations, you could inhale for a 4 count and then pause for 6 to 7 and then exhale for as long as 8. Oh, if you think about that, your inhale is 4 and you're exhaling all the way to 8. So it's twice as long. Now, some people are like, well, I can't exhale that long, or I can't inhale that long. I just tell them to cut the numbers to where they can and then work up to that. But I want you to think about this for a second. If you're in a really stressed situation, people aren't going to be like, I feel so stressed. It's always like, oh my gosh, I feel stressed. Look at, I immediately went vertical and I immediately took an inhale. Okay, so if you're really stressed, immediately think about, I mean, just think of this. Look at how everything relaxes when you take an exhale. Okay, and so we can control our nervous system significantly. And so just remember, and I'll tell you this right now, that this is what I teach, but that doesn't mean I'm perfect, and it doesn't mean I don't have triggers. So when I'm really aligned and I'm in a very balanced state, I can be driving down the road and some guy pulls in front of me and I'm like, really? Was that necessary? And then if I'm not balanced, I might be like honking or saying stuff I probably shouldn't have under my breath. But here's the thing. We have to understand and identify we're always going to have triggers. But as long as we have that stressful moment and we don't live there, right? And so we can immediately, regulate things. Funniest story about that is that very thing happened one time. And Paula was riding with me and she just turned to me and said, "Hey, rise above it." And I just started laughing and it just broke my state. So try and break your state. There's always going to be triggers that stress us out. But remember, we can have a significant amount of control by how we're breathing. So check in. The diaphragm and how we breathe is both a conscious and an unconscious activity. So 95, 99% of the time, you're not going to be consciously aware of how you're breathing. So when you are consciously aware, that's when we really have to do the work to regulate our breathing patterns, to evaluate how we're breathing mechanically. Am I breathing like this? Am I breathing shallow? Or am I breathing full, more expansive and through the diaphragm? So there's something called automaticity. And when you have no restrictions through the diaphragm, no restrictions through your intercostals around the rib heads or the rib cage here, and you can expand naturally and effortlessly, then you develop these automatic behaviors, right? And so the majority of the time, like Paula was saying, when you look at like my data for sleep, I tend to have a really low respiration rate. Number one, because I've worked at it. And then number two, I think many of you have heard Paul and I are mouth tapers. So we tape our mouth at night, and it really facilitates nasal breathing because most people are mouth breathers, and that leads to over breathing. So a lot of things you can do to change the state of your physiology, and it really starts with breathing. Another thing too is like a ball like this, a therapy ball, a foam roll. So you can lie on like the foam roll right here on your belly, lie on that, or lie on a ball like this, and you can start to release some of that restricted fascia in the diaphragm. And what happens with a lot of people is they start to, well, first of all, for some people, it can be real painful. And you can actually roll up a towel like this size and actually just roll on a towel. And many times it can help release that fascia. And you want to lie there and work that area for at least 3 minutes. And as you do that, what will happen is these trigger points or gummed up, balled up tissue will start to relax. And when these tissues start to relax, it increases the extensibility. So the reason why most people don't breathe very well is they're just locked down. They're so compressed. So by freeing that restricted tissue up, now I have this freedom of movement. And that changes, again, it changes my posture. It can change the shape of your body, and it's certainly going to change your nervous system and your biochemistry. So super important. Now just remember, like if you're on a foam roll like this, you're just lying right on the diaphragm. And as a rule of thumb, what we want to do is we want to hold that area for about 3 minutes. Okay. And then you can just kind of roll to another area. So this is something Paul and I do a lot of. And then again, you can have a ball like this, a therapy ball like that, and work that area as well. But again, what we're trying to do is with this myofascial release is it's a form of flexibility, and we're trying to elongate that tissue that's restricted. So we always want to think that especially with musculature, we talked about we want to make sure we're adequately hydrated, getting good mineralization, and then we're taking care of that fascia, doing things like self-myofascial release. Another thing is like a massage stick, right? So I can get into here with even a massage stick, okay? But it's important to, if you're going to do any kind of fascia work, start with your diaphragm because it's such a critical component to optimizing your health. So anything to add to that, Paula?
Yeah, can you explain what a massage stick is? Because not everybody knows what that is.
Yeah, so
Like that it actually rolls.
yeah.
It's not like, think of it as like a high advanced rolling pin.
Yeah, like a rolling pin. So if I take even, put my leg up here, I'll just show you. Basically, all I'm doing is I'm going all over my thigh musculature. And really what you're looking for when you're doing this type of work is you're looking for tender points. And when you find those tender points, and this is very important, you understand that no part of your body, when you roll over with a ball, a foam roll, or a massage stick, no part of your body should hurt intensely. If it does, it just means that that tissue is not healthy. And what happens is when the tissue is restricted, you're going to have a decrease in blood flow. When you have a decrease in blood flow, what's going to happen is the pH balance is going to change. And you're going to be very hypersensitive to any kind of massage or palpation. So if you're really tender in an area, it just means that area is not healthy. And the one thing, it doesn't matter if you're talking conventional medicine, holistic health, the one thing that nobody will ever refute is that if there's a blockage in the body, good things are going to happen, right? So when there's a blockage of any kind, bad things are going to happen, right? A blockage of blood flow, nerve flow, lymph flow. So it's important that we have flow. And when we talk about flow, particularly blood flow, nerve flow, and lymphatic flow. And then the other thing is balance. The body's always going to work best in homeostasis or balance. So make sure that as an individual, there's certain things that you want to have in your arsenal. And I recommend to everyone to have like a small ball like this, like a lacrosse ball, a larger size, a foam roll, and like a massage stick. And you can do so much for your body. I always tell our clients, like, we don't want anyone to be a slave to a doctor or a therapist for the rest of their days. We want to be part of your team, and we want to be able to coach you through certain things, but we don't want to be seeing people for the same thing over and over, because we want our clients to empower themselves to be, and our clients, I tell you what, our clients are highly educated, and our clients are very invested in themselves. And many of you guys take very, very good care of yourselves. And what's so beautiful about that is you're never a slave to a doctor or a therapist or any kind of practitioner, but you'll work with someone like Paula or myself to help coach you through some of the imbalances or some of the challenges you may have. But we want to be able to give you more tools in your tool chest. And speaking of tools in your tool chest, something super simple. We love to have everyone start with the diaphragm, because that's such a critical area, but then also your hands and your feet. Just releasing the fascia, tight fascia in your hands and your feet and your diaphragm can dramatically change your physiology. Show them what we do with so what are these, Paula?
These are like steel. Are they stainless steel?
Stainless steel.
Stainless steel chopsticks, believe it or not. So these stainless steel chopsticks. So at night, if we're like watching TV or something, what we're doing is we're putting it between our fingers, finding where the tender points are, and then holding it for like up to 3 minutes. And then I just keep doing each finger to try to keep releasing. So releasing the fascia in there. So you kind of can feel like, is it more tight like this, or is it more tight here? And then you just breathe, because it's like really tight right here. So you just breathe into it and try to hold it for 3 minutes.
Yeah, and your breath is what will dictate the amount of pressure. So for instance, if you're doing this and it's super intense, then decrease the intensity on that, and then let your breath guide you. So if you're using a small ball or a foam roll and you're in your diaphragm and you're like, oh my gosh, this is miserable, then you have to put less pressure. And remember, what we're after is, we're not after beating up the muscle, we're after really coaxing it into that new length. Okay. So
Is that also
show
the
'em-
fascia? Is that the fascia between the hands? That's the muscle that you're working, or is that the fascia?
yeah, that's all that connective tissue, all that
Yeah.
fascia right here. And really, one of the things, if you spread your fingers, then what you're really opening up that fascia. But you will, I guarantee you will find some really tender points. And then I've had 2 ankle surgeries on my left ankle. And when I start working the webbing between my feet, my left is significantly more tender than my right. And so what's beautiful about something like this is you can tape 2, and that's what I generally do. I'll tape 2 of the stainless steel chopsticks together. Now, you don't even need a chopstick. You can use your finger, putting pressure right there with just your finger. So you can use your finger. I like to use the chopsticks because I can also take my fingers here and press down on it, and I can really get a little bit better depth. And there's some points that you will discover that are quite painful. So again, you just back off to where you're comfortable, you breathe through it, And you will be amazed if you work your diaphragm, you work your hands and your feet. It's amazing how that will improve the fluid dynamics in your body, and it will optimize your immune system. It offers tremendous microcirculation. There are so many benefits. You can also remodel, reshape the structure. What you really notice is a decrease in pain and better mobility. So really, really great to do. What else have you noticed, Paula, with you doing the myofascial work with your hands and feet?
I think in the beginning it was really extreme, but now I feel like I can get in there quite a bit more, and it doesn't hurt as bad. Like I feel like it's kind of a little bit more loose. It's loosened up a lot more.
Yeah, it's really good stuff, guys. So simple. Again, you can use a pencil, a pen. Um, I've used a screwdriver before. Your finger. 3 minutes. That's what we're looking at. Is when you get into an area like this, we're just going to hold that for 3 minutes, using our breath as our guide. So if you're doing each hand, it's 12 minutes a hand, 12 minutes a foot, and try and do this with like using net time. So NET, net time, no extra time. So if you're watching TV or you're on a Zoom like this, this is when you can work that fascia. And again, there's something called the aggregation of marginal gains. And what that means is it's the small, consistent things done day in and day out that are going to ultimately lead to really dramatic changes in your health. And the one thing that Paul will tell you when it comes to a lot of this stuff, I mean, I'm a product of the product. I practice what I preach. I'm super diligent. I don't work out a ton, but I don't miss workouts. I stretch on a regular basis. I do joint mobilization. I do a lot of fascia work. I just find the time to get it in. So don't think like you have to spend in a huge amount of time. The most important thing when it comes to your health is just show up, just be consistent, and then live by this: good, better, and best. There's times you just do the best you can. And sometimes you're going to make good choices. Sometimes you're going to make better choices. And sometimes you'll make the best choice. But if you find yourself in a situation, and that's the thing about like travel, Paula will tell you, I generally don't go anywhere without all my toys. Like I have a suitcase, and that's what my suitcase consists of, that and some clothes. And for Paula, it's that and some supplements. So you gotta know what you need. And the big thing is just being prepared, just planning and then working it in. If you're having problems with your shoulders, say, just look at mobilizing your shoulders more. Maybe you need more stretching for the shoulder. Okay. Maybe you've got systemic inflammation. So you don't necessarily have to mobilize your whole body. Maybe you just mobilize your hips or your back during that period of time. And then when you have extra time, then you can obviously spend a little bit more time on that. But in terms of mobility, our body actually has 3 planes of motion that it operates in. So there's something called the sagittal plane. So if I'm going to mobilize my neck, I'm going to drop my chin to my chest and then look back at the ceiling as far as you can. So everyone just try that. Tuck your chin to your chest, take an inhale, exhale, look back as far as you can. And then all you're going to do is inhale and exhale through that motion. Now, when it comes to articulating or moving your joints, you want to articulate each joint as many times as you are of age. And if the joint has been damaged, then you want to articulate that joint as many as 100 to 200 articulations. So if my neck is really stiff, I would do 3 planes of motion. So I would go chin to chest, back. I would articulate that for 40 or 50 times. And then ear to shoulder, ear to shoulder. Most people are very tight in this frontal plane, this side to side plane. So if it's my back, I might go side bend, right? So again, whatever joint, so like with my wrist, I would just move or articulate that wrist as many times I am of age. Or again, if it's been damaged, you would move that, articulate that as many as 100 to 200 times in a day. Okay. So what happens when I move or articulate this joint? If I have calcium deposits or joint salts, I break that junk up. If I have scar tissue or adhesions, I break that junk up. So getting back to the neck, this is what's called the sagittal plane. Side to side, that's the frontal plane. And then if I look over my shoulder, and rotate that, that's called the transverse plane. And so if you find you're sitting a lot, your neck's getting stiff, just articulate in those 3 planes of motion and remember the rule of thumb when we're moving joints. If it's my elbow, I can do something called an elbow circle. So basically what I'm doing is I'm scooping this hand under my armpit and then going out. So there's all these different mobilization type movements you can do to keep your joints healthy. And then of course, making sure, you're drinking plenty of water. Your body's not systemically inflamed. You're getting adequate mineralization as well. So if you're sitting a lot, another thing too, I'll just back up and show you, like you might do a transverse plane here, just circle the hips. So it doesn't take a lot, but the big thing is consistency. Now with my low back, I can also flex forward, extend back. Okay. Most people do a lot of things in flexion and not enough in extension. So it's important to go through all these different variables, and based on what your lifestyle is, like today, again, people are working from home, they're sitting more. So just try and get up. And I know sometimes it's hard, it can break continuity, but even if you have to set an alarm and just, work your fingers, work your toes, do some joint mobility, super, super important. So, Paula, do you have anything to add there?
I don't think so. That's good.
Okay. So guys, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat and
I think
we'll go
somebody had a
ahead.
question. I look at Kelly, I think had a question that came across. Do you see that?
Let me just check
No
the
question. It was just a
chat.
comment. I was just commenting that,
Oh, you were commenting.
yeah, I took out my my little roller tool, my roll stick, and started doing that around my diaphragm area. And I'm like, oh my gosh, which I know, because I'll even do foam rolling kind of like under my armpit down the side and stuff. And that's always sore spot. And I'm like, oh, I just need to get in there with my roll stick too. And ay. Where do you guys get your stainless steel, those metal chopstick thingies?
Just on
Yeah,
Amazon.
yeah, you
It
can just order them on Amazon, and you can get a pack of like 8 or 10 for, I don't know, like $6 or $7. I mean,
Okay, so I can have
it's
room for the
great.
house.
They're
Yeah.
light, they're portable. Again, just you guys, you can use a pen. The reason why these stainless steel chopsticks are nice is they're light, and they're not going to break, so, but it's great. And then, so Kelly was using the stick on her diaphragm. And then like the next thing I would recommend is then you start using like a foam roll, really working on loosening up the diaphragm with the foam roll. And that's something that you can just lie on. And then it's little micro movements, because what you'll find is certain areas are like, oh, that's not too bad. You'll move it like a couple of millimeters and you're like, oh my gosh. So what we're trying to do is identify where are the restrictions. And then we sit there for at least 3 minutes. Now that's just a general rule of thumb, but I'll oftentimes sit in an area for 5 to 7 minutes. And sometimes what I will do is I'll just be maybe listening to a podcast. And then sometimes I'm actually listening to something called binaural beats. So if you go online on YouTube and search for binaural beats, like alpha or gamma, it'll put you in this really focused meditative state. And what I will do is I will listen to those binaural beats and I'll just really focus on where it's painful and visualize. And that's the great thing about the binaural beats is it connects your brain to your body. And that's another thing about breathing. Breathing is the bridge between the mind and the body. So when you get really focused, what you'll find is that tissue will really start to melt and you become very connected with your body. And the more connected you are with your body and the more you understand it, the more you can optimize it. And, the big thing that Paul and I really try and teach with everyone is we just have to be balanced, right? From a biochemical standpoint, from a muscular standpoint, joint health. And the more harmony that we live in, the more balance that we have, the more mobility, the greater independence we're going to have as we get older. The big thing is we never want our clients to play the age card. I don't care if you're 50, if you're 60, if you're 70, we can live a life that's vibrant, that's pain-free, full of energy, full of life. We want our clients to be able to share amazing stories of travel and joyful times with their family. And this is why we all as individuals must realize we are not being selfish if we take care of ourselves and we make ourselves the number one priority. Because if you make yourself the number one priority, you have more to give. So just make sure that when you think about what you're doing for yourself, you realize the end goal is that there's more of you to share with the world, whether that's friends or family, work, you're at your very best. So Paula, anything you want to add?
We definitely have some impressive clients that are more mature as and doing some pretty cool things. I mean, we have one client, she comes walking in and she's in her 70s and she's like lunging in my office and she's like, show me your biceps. And she's like, it's just like, and then I watched the video today. It's kind of fun to watch videos of people that are more mature and like really doing good things with their life. It's kind of inspiring. And this lady was 72 and she bodybuilds. And I'm like, that's so cool. I mean, she started bodybuilding at like 68 years old. It's just like, I need a goal. I need something to shoot for. Not that everybody should be a bodybuilder, but she just, just kind of fun to be able to push herself and kind of see where she could go after she had a back fusion. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So she had to train around her back, but just living your best life. Like Rob said, not playing the age card, like a lot of people talk about. I think Karen had a question too. Did you see that Karen had a question?
Yeah. What kind of mobility exercise would you do for tight hamstrings? So with a hamstring, it's not as much of a mobility as it would be a flexibility. And so when we take a look at the most effective and efficient way to stretch a hamstring, There's a number of methodologies. So typically when someone's stretching a hamstring, what they might do is put a leg up and then just hold statically. It can be effective, but in my opinion, it's very inefficient. So one of the things to really loosen up the hamstring, put it in a stretch position and then take something like a massage stick. And then what you're doing is in the stretch position, you're bringing blood flow to the area and you're optimizing the health of that fascia. And then once you really warm up that tissue, the best way to really stretch the hamstring would be doing something called PNF. So it's contract and relax. PNF is just a fancy term, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. I just like to say it to feel smart. But it's really just contracting and then relaxing the muscle. So if I want to stretch this hamstring, the best thing you can do after you use the massage stick to warm up that tissue is flex your thigh. So flex your thigh as hard as you can. And I like to just tell people to say tension, 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 relax. And then what you do is you drive your heel into that bench or the bed, wherever you're at, drive that in and then flex the thigh, creating the tension. And then you just relax into it. Now, if you watch, if I'm stretching my hamstring, I'm not rounding my back. I'm arching my back, pushing my hips out, and then that will isolate the hamstring more. Typically, you'll see people do this, which is then also getting the low back musculature involved. So if you really want to target the hamstring, we start by warming the tissue with something like a massage stick. And then we would do something like that contract, relax. So we contract the antagonistic or the opposite muscle, which in this case would be the thigh. And that will allow the hamstring to get a greater stretch. So
And you can do that with any muscle.
What's that?
And you can do that with any muscle.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
if your like legs are out and you're in that position, you tighten, 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 and then relax and keep going forward to try to get that flexibility. It's pretty interesting when you do the breath, the tight, 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 and then you just relax, like how much deeper you can get the more you do it. I mean, if you do 10 times and you just really focus on that, you can really improve your flexibility. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I had in fact, our daughter's in competitive cheer. And so she needed to work on her flexibility. So I was stretching with her and we were doing these techniques and she dramatically improved her flexibility. And part of that is you're also working your nervous system, you're overriding your nervous system. So by creating that tension, there's something called the Golgi tendon organ, which basically says, hey, you're going to rip your muscle. So if you contract hard, you can override that organ. And then you have like a 2-second window to actually get into a deeper stretch before that kicks in. So again, you're training the nervous system because it's the nervous system that keeps us from going too far. And so there's lots of really great techniques out there. And this is all about, if I'm going to invest X amount of time and energy, am I getting the most value for that investment of time and energy? And most people, when it comes to exercise, they're grossly inefficient at best. And at worst, they're doing things that are potentially injurious. I mean, all I will tell you, like if we ever travel, sometimes I typically just bring all my workout stuff, but sometimes I like to go into a gym and just do research because I'm like watching people do stuff and it just gives me good material to talk about, but the big thing is you want to think about whatever you're doing, are you being efficient with what you're doing? Because if your goal is X, do you have the right strategy? Are you integrating the principles of the aggregation of marginal gain, just taking consistent steps every day. You take a simple step tomorrow, your body doesn't change the next day. But if you keep taking those steps, the next thing you know, your body starts to change. And when you start to see results, it gives you that momentum. And once that snowball starts rolling down the hill and you get that momentum, it just makes you feel like you can do so much more. So we've had a few clients recently that have lost 15, 20, 25 pounds, and everything changes their mental outlook, their energy, their confidence. And the same thing with pain. If you're in pain, it's draining. And that's why what's great is you have a lot of control over some of those pain patterns. So, if you guys are interested in something like a rad rod, we've got the rad rods at the Body Project. Out of all my tools, it's probably one of my favorite tools that I've ever had. Love the foam roll, but sometimes this gets bulky to travel with. And Paula will tell you, if she's taken a few pictures with me up 10, 11,000 feet climbing the mountains, and I have this in my backpack. So it travels really well, and it's just a really great tool for people to have. So any other questions that you guys might have? I don't see it. Anything else you want to add, Paula, to?
I don't think so.
Okay, so in terms of, just remember, in terms of mobility, guys, whatever joint you're talking about, you want to move or articulate that joint as many times as you are of age. And again, if that joint's been damaged, you want to articulate that joint as many as 100 to 200 articulations. Now, one thing I will just leave you with, if I'm mobilizing my hips, I can have large amplitude movements. If I'm mobilizing my knees, I would only want small amplitude movements. And so it's important that you guys understand that each joint is designed to move a certain way. But when it comes to things like wrist circles and the elbow circles, hip circles, shoulder circles, really simple things, and the neck mobility. The neck mobility is probably one of the most underrated areas that a lot of people don't work, and most people are so tight in their neck. So again, chin to chest, side to side, and then that rotatory action, really, really important. So one more question here, I think. Karen McLucas, we love you too. You're the best. Guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Love sharing anything we can to optimize your life. And we can't thank you guys enough. We love our clients so much. We're so grateful for each and every one of you guys. And we just feel blessed that we can share the journey with you guys to help you be the very best that you guys can be. And we love, love, love hearing wins. We love when you guys share, things that you've done with your family, trips you've taken. We love seeing pictures of you on tops of mountains and things like that. So just know that really fills us up. So we appreciate you guys very much. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.